feet and weighing on average up to 15 pounds for large specimens. But it's believed the diamondbacks can actually grow even larger than this, with at least one documented specimen having reached an incredible 7.8 feet and 34 pounds. Luckily for you, most diamondbacks are much smaller than this, and their rattle will warn you to stay well away from their highly venomous fangs. Number 19. King Cobra. King cobras average a length of up to 12 feet, but some specimens have been measured at a whopping 18 feet and can weigh up to 30 pounds.
You know what? That's so funny. Literally go to watch the XQC stream, and as soon as you just go, fuck it!
The snake is perhaps best known for its threat displays,
funny.
when it'll rise up to 4 feet off the ground and stare its victim in the face. Despite its fearsome reputation, though, king cobras are notoriously shy creatures and typically only attack when threatened, backed into a corner, or defending a clutch of eggs. Surprisingly, regular rattlesnakes in North America cause 5 times as many deaths.
What is he getting angry about anyway? Oh. How much does he have to get? 99? 100? Oh, the concentration here. Got a star.
Let's go, baby! Bad. I could have done better. For some reason, my right eye kept looking.
Okay, enough of that. I'll just carry on with this.
Deaths per year as king cobras do across Southeast Asia. Number 18. Sanaja. Now it's time for our first prehistoric member of this countdown, and if the fact that this snake appears at number 18 tells you anything, it's that this means most of history's deadliest snakes are very much still alive in our modern era. The Sanaja hails from the late Cretaceous in modern-day India and was first discovered coiled around an egg adjacent to a sauropod hatchling. From this, scientists have inferred that the snake preyed on young dinosaurs and their eggs, likely meaning that the snake was highly venomous, as it would have to ensure a fast kill in order to escape an egg clutch before mom and dad have a chance to respond. Coming in at 11 feet, Sanaja was probably a
ads. Why the ads? Go away, ads. Stop it. I don't want any ads.
Pretty heavy snake, given its diet of large dinosaur eggs and their equally large hatchlings. Number 17. Olive python. You already know we couldn't possibly do a video discussing terrifying animals and not include Australia. God put Australia at the very southern edge of the world, surrounded by oceans, and still humans didn't get the message to keep out. Coming in at 13 feet and weighing as much as 40 pounds, the olive python has been giving unwary bushwhackers out on walkabouts the Hershey squirts for centuries. Yet despite its impressive size and penchant for eating crocodiles, the olive python is actually considered to be one of the friendliest snakes in the world and pose no threat to humans. Snake owners rave about olive pythons for their beauty, but also their curious, calm temperament when out of their cages. Number 16. Papuan python. If snakes had legs, they'd rule the world. But thankfully for us, evolution has limited their predatory advantages to keen senses, muscular bodies, and venomous fangs. But then evolution hacked the game and gave one species of python access to cheats. Enter the Papuan python, a snake with chameleon-like powers to change its color. Coming in at 17 feet and weighing up to 50 pounds, the Papuan python is a terrifying predator in its own right, even without the added advantage of chameleon powers. Scientists still don't understand how or why the snake can change colors, but this python is capable of changing from jet black to mustard yellow, possibly depending on its mood. Number 15. Cuban boa. One good thing about snakes is that at the very least they're solitary animals, or at least they were until scientists discovered Cuban boas hunting together in a pack. That's right, Cuban boas took the advantage that humans, wolves, and wild dogs and lions have, pack tactics, and added it to their already terrifying arsenal of natural advantages. For now, these boas, which can grow up to 16 feet and weigh as much as 60 pounds, limit their pack hunting to bats, as dozens of snakes line up outside of cave entrances and snatch flying bats out of the air. But it's only a matter of time before these huge snakes get a taste for man and start lining up outside of our Walmarts to prey on the unwary. Number 14. Dark Spotted Anaconda. When people think anacondas, they think of two things, Sir Mix-a-Lot and the green anaconda. However, the green anaconda may be the largest of its cousins, but is one of several species. This shrimp of the absolutely monstrous family of snakes is still a significantly large snake nonetheless, with the dark-spotted anaconda growing up to 15 feet and weighing up to 70 pounds. Primarily a water snake, the dark-spotted anaconda preys on anything stupid enough to enter the Amazonian rivers, where it makes its home. Number 13. Yellow Anaconda. In what will definitely not be the last showing for the anaconda family on this list, the yellow anaconda is slightly bigger than the dark-spotted anaconda, reaching lengths of up to 15.1 feet and weighing as much as 77 pounds. Its yellowish skin allows the anaconda to perfectly blend in with the murky waters of turbulent rivers, or along the muddy banks where it stalks everything from large mammals to crocodiles. Perhaps unsurprisingly, yellow anacondas are not recommended to be kept as pets, as they're extremely aggressive animals. Number 12. Boa constrictor. The boa constrictor may also be called the common boa, but there's very little that's average about this monstrous snake. A common fixture in the homes of many of America's favorite creepy uncles that never got married, the boa is notorious for eating pets, and even children, when poorly taken care of, coming in at sizes up to 14 feet. And an average weight of 33 pounds. Some common boas have grown to absolutely monstrous sizes and weight as much as 100 pounds. Though, thankfully for anyone that doesn't fancy being suffocated to death by a giant snake as their ribs snap like matchsticks, it is incredibly rare for them to grow to this size. Number 11. Bolivian Anaconda. Coming in at 13 feet and weighing just a little more than its yellow anaconda and dark-spotted anaconda cousins, the Bolivian anaconda was believed to be a hybrid between yellow and green anacondas. But recent research has confirmed that this frightening snake is a species all its own. Thankfully, this massive snake makes its home primarily in the jungles of Bolivia and surrounding areas, but is a notorious threat to domesticated wildlife that's been hunted to near extinction. Number 10. Yurlungur. Sounding like an Icelandic heavy metal band, Yurlungur is a prehistoric snake only recently discovered. This massive 20-foot snake roamed Australia during the Miocene period, where it hunted in packs of up to 30 snakes at a time and took down prey on land and in sea. Fine, we don't actually know anything about its hunting behavior, as very little fossil evidence of this snake has been discovered. But at this point, given everything we've learned about snakes so far, we wouldn't be surprised if any of that was actually true. Either way, we're glad this one's extinct, though Australia definitely has more than enough modern horrors to worry about. Number 9. Amethystine Python. The amethystine python is one of 6 of the world's largest living snakes, and if you're paying close attention, you'll see that means only 3 of our top 10 most terrifying snakes to ever lived in the ancient past. This means that our modern world may be the most terrifying place to live for anyone with a fear of snakes. Also known as the scrub python, there's nothing scrubbish about this massive snake, which can reach an incredible 22.7 feet in length and weigh as much as 110 pounds. This massive constrictor snake makes its home, where else, in Australia, along the northernmost tip of the continent, and is endemic.
Next time you do this, you could be doing this. How? By
endemic to Western New Guinea. These massive snakes eat everything from birds to possums to even wallabies, and pretty much anything that happens to wander by while it's feeling hungry. Number 8. Wanambi. Yet another monster snake from Australia, the Wanambi was well known to the Aboriginals that inhabited the land down under. Measuring between 5 and 6 meters long, this massive snake was known to lay in ambush at watering holes, where prey would be forced to come to it. Capable of killing and consuming a small child, Aboriginal children were cautioned to never approach a watering hole alone and wait for an adult. Another non-venomous snake, the Wanambi instead preferred to crush prey to death before swallowing it whole. Number 7. Indian Rock Python. The Indian rock python is peculiar for a snake in that it's one of the few snakes that seems almost reluctant to attack, even in self-defense. Notoriously lethargic and very slow-moving, these massive pythons have been known to go up to 2 years without a meal. When on a hunt, though, the Indian rock python uses its muscular body to asphyxiate prey before swallowing it whole. The largest of these pythons ever officially recorded was discovered in Pakistan and grew to 15 feet and weighed in at 110 pounds. Curiously, these pythons are known to vomit up their meals if they feel threatened, so they don't accidentally puncture their own bodies on bones, hooves, or antlers before slithering away to safety. Number 6. African rock python. The largest snake in Africa, the African rock python is the undisputed heavyweight of the African bush, growing up to 20 feet and weighing up to an incredible 201 pounds. There's little this massive snake fears from Africa's other predators. Thankfully, the average size of an African rock python differs based on geography, with snakes living closer to human settlements being smaller, and the uninhabited wilds of Sierra Leone home to the true monsters of this species. The true maximum size of this species is unknown, and rumors persist of even larger snakes such as the one spotted by a World War II veteran pilot in the 50s while flying a helicopter in the Congo. A passenger managed to take this photograph of the massive snake, and though the true size is impossible to estimate, it does appear to dwarf some of the large bushes and small trees in the image. Number 5. Burmese python. In modern times, it doesn't get much bigger than the incredible Burmese python. Growing up to 19 feet, the largest verified Burmese python weighed in at an absolutely mind-blowing 403 pounds. At these sizes, there's very little that's off the menu for this snake, and that includes humans, with stories of Burmese pythons crushing humans to death and then eating them head first regularly reported in the media. In 2018, a woman from Indonesia went missing after going to check on her vegetable garden. What the rescue party discovered was terrifying. A monster of a python with a huge bloated belly that when cut open revealed the remains of the dead woman. And if you think you're safe living in America, think again, as in 2019 a 17-foot python was found in the US. Number 4. Reticulated python. Most snakes have a fairly limited range, which is only expanded when humans who make terrible life decisions try and keep one as a pet, only to realize it's far too difficult to handle such a massive snake and release it into their local wilderness. The reticulated python, the longest living snake in the world, doesn't need humans to spread its reign of terror, as it's an excellent swimmer that's been spotted far out at sea. The largest recorded python weighed in at 350 pounds and was an incredible 25.2 feet long, though it's believed that even larger specimens are possible in the most remote areas of the South Asian habitat. Reticulated pythons have been known to kill and eat everything from sun bears to human children. Number 3. Green anaconda. When you think man-eating snake, you probably think of the green anaconda, and not without reason. Averaging in around 22 feet in length, green anacondas routinely weigh as much as 200 pounds. However, historical records have given us lengths of almost 30 feet and weights in excess of 300 pounds. Amazon natives had told many stories of snakes even larger than this, with lengths of 35 to 40 feet and weights of over 400 pounds. Historically, it's been difficult to verify many of these encounters with monstrous snakes, as these massively powerful animals are less than cooperative about stretching out so they can be measured by scientists. Given the incredible sizes other snakes can reach in areas untouched by humans and the long lifespan of an anaconda, such reports of monster snakes may not be without some merit. Number 2. Gigantophis. Until the discovery of the snake at the number 1 spot on our countdown, Gigantophis was considered to be the largest snake that ever lived. Initial size estimates had it growing from 30 to 35 feet, but revised estimates have shortened this figure to just over 22 feet. Living during the Paleogene period, mammals were just beginning to diversify and celebrate the fall of their cruel dinosaur overlords, until Gigantophis showed up to eat them whole and remind them that reptiles were still the coolest kids on the block. Number 2. Titanoboa. This is it, the snake that ruled them all, the largest snake of all in discovered history. While modern anacondas are rumored to grow up to 40 feet, the Titanoboa regularly grew up to 42 feet in length. And
I've watched crazy CIA stuff.
20-year-old Takehiko Ino was prepared to die. It was April 28, 1945.
Yeah, fuck it, I'll watch it.
We want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Morning Brew. As a fan of the infographics show, we know that just like us, you're tired of business, finance, technique versus its Russian competition. It more than makes up for
this video is sponsored by NordVPN.
Get ready to learn about the craziest CIA covert operations. Number 10. Spying is for the birds. Literally. It's the height of the Cold War, East versus West, democracy versus Stalinism. With nuclear weapons aimed at each other's throats, the US and Soviet Union are in for a struggle for the very fate of the world itself. In this high-stakes, winner-take-all, zero-sum game, the United States unveils its newest weapon, a pigeon. Well, not just one pigeon, thousands of them. all released in Eastern Europe with the hopes they'll drop sensors that will help the US learn where the Soviet Union is conducting chemical weapons tests. Pigeons were even trained to fly cameras over facilities, with surprisingly good quality images being returned. But pigeons are far from the only birds enlisted to defeat the Reds, and ravens are too put to task, fighting for freedom in the American way. These especially clever animals are trained to drop off listening devices on windowsills that are otherwise inaccessible. And in at least one operation, a red laser beam was used to guide a raven to a target, drop off the bug, and return to its handler with the use of a special lamp. Sadly, that particular operation yielded no usable intelligence as the bug failed to work properly, but the CIA would go on to successfully use birds in many still classified operations. With the ability to fly loads up to 40 grams, there's little doubt that in today's age of smart, miniaturized electronics, birds are once more on the front lines of the CIA's covert wars. But the CIA's next crazy operation truly takes things out of this world. Number 9. Flying saucers from the Earth? In 1950, flying saucers were all
So I have a remote job where I work from home and work only 5 hours a week. But the craziest part is I get paid
and I have zero fucks that
it seemed like everybody was
it.
seeing one every other day. With events like Roswell and the real-life flying saucer invasion of Washington, though, we can hardly blame boomers for being afraid of aliens from outer space or south of the border. During the height of the flying saucer mania, the CIA and the Air Force both got an idea. What if there was something to flying saucers? If alien flying saucers could cross the void of space, surely they'd do a pretty good job of flying around the Earth, right? With generous funding from the federal government's black budget, the CIA and Air Force began collaborating on a flying saucer-shaped vehicle that could fly spy missions deep into the Soviet Union and shoot down bombers. After all, what better cover for a secret CIA vehicle than making it look like an alien is piloting it? Turns out there's a reason UFOs are claimed to use all sorts of science fiction tech, like magnetic levitation or even ESP, because without it, they fly about as well as a drunk frisbee. After an unknown number of years in testing, the flying saucer program was finally canceled in 1961 as the design was deemed completely uncontrollable at high speeds and aerodynamically unstable. The CIA is meant to protect Americans, but the next crazy covert operation made the CIA an enemy of the American people. Number 8. Operation Blame the Cubans. It's 1962 and the Soviets have done the unthinkable. Cooperate with Cuba to place Soviet military forces literally next door to America. You know, sort of the way that the US had placed nuclear missiles in Turkey and on the Soviet Union's doorstep. Something had to be done about Cuban-Soviet cooperation before the relationship got too chummy, and that something was an invasion. Only one problem: how to justify an invasion of a tiny country that had absolutely nothing to do with the US. No worries, the CIA quickly came to the rescue. Proposed to President John F. Kennedy, who immediately rejected the idea and fired more than a few of the CIA's top brass. Operation Northwoods was a convoluted plan to, in essence, carry out terrorist attacks all across the US and blame them on Cuban operatives. Plans included assassinations, the bombing of a restaurant in D.C., riots, and other acts of terrorism. Basically, the CIA was seeking permission to go all Grand Theft Auto on the US and then blame it on the Cubans. Thankfully, Kennedy immediately shot down the proposal, and along with it, the careers of several CIA personnel. Who says the CIA doesn't have a heart, though? The next CIA operation was all about turning former enemies into close new friends. Number 7. Operation Paperclip. After long years of fighting Nazi Germany, one thing was clear: Nazis were terrible. But they were pretty brilliant about coming up with ways to kill people. With the freeze of the Cold War setting in, the United States desperately needed some of that good old-fashioned Nazi murder know-how for itself. Barely 1 year after the end of hostilities, the US president authorized Operation Paperclip, handled by the Office of Strategic Services and predecessor to the CIA. The goal of Paperclip was simple: lure or threaten former Nazi scientists into making the move to the United States and working for America, with the other option being getting swept up by Soviet KGB agents and forced to make missiles in Siberia. It wasn't exactly a hard sell getting Nazi scientists to make the move out to sunny California. The project remains one of the most controversial aspects of the post-World War II period, as many Nazi scientists who should have rightly been tried as war criminals were instead granted a free pass to live a very comfortable life in the US in exchange for their genius. One man in particular, Wernher von Braun, helped establish the American space program and masterminded the Apollo missions, but received lifelong criticism for his role in developing V-2 rockets to be used on civilians in Britain. The next CIA crazy covert operation is one they don't want you learning about, so feel free to shut this video off now. No, really, Uncle Sam would thank you. Number 6. Let the CIA do your thinking for you. The Cold War was a terrifying time for the world. With the US and Soviet Union locked in a bid for global supremacy, there was just one problem. Why should an auto plant worker from Detroit or a farmer from the Russian Urals care? What stake did the average Soviet or American citizen really have in the world's greatest international penis measuring contest to date? Turns out the average Joe on either side of the Iron Curtain had little stake in the posturing between East and West, but the CIA and KGB were here to fix that. Operation Mockingbird was a still little understood operation undertaken by the CIA to convince Americans that Russians were bad. While the full extent of the CIA's reach is still not known, a former investigation in the 1970s revealed 50 journalists at the country's most influential newspapers all had secret links to the CIA and were compensated to run CIA-approved articles. The program was eventually shut down for, ironically, mirroring the exact same press manipulation and intimidation tactics that the Soviets used and freedom-loving apple pie-eating Americans were supposed to abhor. Still, rumors persist to this day that the program never really ended, with QAnon believers now claiming that every headline they don't like is part of Operation Mockingbird. Like survival challenges, pooping in the woods, and learning to fight like a guerrilla fighter? Well then, the Cold War-era CIA sure had a job for you. Number 5. The CIA created the original doomsday preppers. During the Cold War, nothing kept the CIA awake at night more than the thought of Soviet tanks steamrolling the free countries of Western Europe. The paranoia of a Soviet invasion was so high that the CIA and US military, along with NATO members, cooperated in the creation of a top-secret counter-invasion force, codenamed Operation Gladio. Members of NATO set about creating secret armies, personnel from all walks of life who would remain behind in case of Soviet invasion and engage in a guerrilla war of resistance. The plan was simple. Without using nuclear weapons to stop them, Soviet armies would easily.
This woman launched a superfood company. Her name is Crystal de Groot and she struggled with eczema, an autoimmune disease which she healed by changing her diet.
Reach all the way to France before the US could transfer the bulk of its forces to Europe. Rather than fight a certain-to-be-lost battle, nations all over the border with the Soviet bloc would fight retreating actions while leaving behind large amounts of clandestine forces. Once the Soviets swept past them, these secret armies would rise up and wreak havoc on Soviet supply and communication lines, grinding the Soviet advance to a halt. Operation Gladio was so secret that even some of the highest-ranking members of government and military in the nations these secret armies were staged in had no idea of their existence. It would only be at the end of the Cold War that the secret of these ghost armies would finally be revealed. Ironically, the world would also learn that despite all the paranoia, the Soviet Union didn't have a single plan to ever preemptively invade Western Europe. And it was in fact just as terrified as the West that NATO would invade it first. The next crazy CIA covert operation was definitely the cat's meow. Number 4. Eavesdropping kitties. The internet loves cats. This is a fact. Turns out the CIA also loves cats, or at least used to. Operation Acoustic Kitty may have sounded like a traditional codename meant to throw off anyone who learned its name as to its true nature, but for once this codename was spot on. Gathering intelligence was of the utmost importance during the Cold War, and the best way to do that was to eavesdrop on people. Problem is, trained spies are pretty good at realizing they're being listened to, and technology to help detect bugs and even long-range listening devices was getting better and better every passing year. Enter the humble kitty cat. At some point, a CIA R&D specialist with way too much time on their hands got the brilliant idea of using cats to spy on people. After all, cats are pretty innocuous, and unless you're suffering from a crippling mental illness, you're not likely to think your cat is spying on you. To accomplish the task of creating spy kitties, the CIA surgically implanted microphones onto cats, with a wire leading to a transmitter implanted in the cat's tail. Unsurprisingly, the plan was met with little success, as training the cats and getting them to do what they were told proved entirely too difficult even for a global spy agency like the CIA. Literally any cat owner could have told them that though, and saved the US government millions of dollars. Also, the first test cat was apparently run over in its first field trial just seconds after being released, though the CIA continues to deny said kitty was actually killed. Let's face it, when the Cold War started, the Soviet Union didn't just have the better spy agency, they had better technology, but the CIA was determined to change that. Number 3. Borrowing a Soviet satellite. In the 1960s, it was clear the Soviets were winning the space race, with America coming in at a distant second. The Soviets didn't just trumpet their accomplishments in space, though. They decided to rub it in America's face by putting the Lunik satellite on a world tour. As the first spacecraft to approach the moon and return, It represented the state of the art at the time and the cutting edge of human exploration. While the Lunik was on tour, the CIA decided it would borrow the spacecraft for a night and take the entire thing apart bolt by bolt to learn everything it could about Soviet space engineering. The truck carrying the satellite was intercepted and the driver encouraged to take the night off at a local hotel under CIA guard. Meanwhile, CIA agents and American engineers went to work on the Lunik. Over the course of the night, they photographed every square inch of the spacecraft, though sadly most of the electronics were missing. The next morning, the original driver was returned and compensated for his silence. The next CIA covert operation was perhaps their most infamous, even if it was a complete failure. Number 2. Operation Kill Castro. There's perhaps few rivalries in history more famous than that of the CIA and Fidel Castro. For years, the CIA did its best to kill him, and yet Castro would go on to die peacefully at a ripe old age, having outlived many of the agents whose job it had been to end his life. Known as Operation Mongoose, for almost 3 years, the CIA tried everything in its power to kill Castro, floating such insane ideas as exploding seashells, diving suits laced with poisonous fungus, and of course, exploding cigars. The intensity of the CIA's attempts to kill Castro actually ended up leading to the creation of his own cigar company to ensure the safety and security of Castro's beloved cigars. Plot after plot was either attempted or brainstormed and rejected as impractical. One attempt to poison his shoes as he left them out for cleaning by local hotel staff was canceled at the last minute because Castro was at the time visiting the UN, and it was believed it would make the US look bad if Castro bit the dust as he was attending a peaceful international assembly. Another plot involved training a former lover to assassinate him in private, and after months of preparation and training by the CIA, the lover was sent back to Cuba and managed to spend the night with him, only
being a black creator on YouTube gives you the opportunity to inspire people, give them value
to fall back in love with him and admit the entire plot. The true length and breadth of the insanity that the CIA explored in their attempt to kill Castro may never be known, but the plots that are public knowledge hint at the legacy of incredibly inventive assassination attempts which all failed or were impractical in hilarious ways. Our number 1 crazy CIA covert operation is one whose terrible legacy will never ever truly be known. Number 1. MK Ultra. At last we have it, the single most insane CIA operation ever attempted, that we know of anyway. Known as MK Ultra, the CIA's attempt to develop psychic powers is legendary, and without a doubt the most batshit crazy waste of taxpayer money in US history. Officially running for 20 years, MK Ultra sought every way conceivable to control a subject's mind. Nothing was out of the question, and no idea was too insane to try. Claims by self-proclaimed psychics and mentalists were explored, their techniques analyzed and scrutinized. Chemists toiled for years to create cocktails of chemicals capable of controlling a person's mind. Even zombie drugs used by voodoo practitioners were explored. Nothing was off limits during the age of MK Ultra, though one drug in particular drew a great deal of attention: LSD. The CIA explored every possible use of LSD for the purpose of making enemy spies compliant and willing to give up their secrets. It was no secret that the agency would routinely expose its own agents to LSD in a bid to examine its effects, once even dosing an entire office party celebrating a birthday. The full range and extent of MK Ultra may never be known, as when the rest of the government started getting wind of the insanity the CIA was engaged in, not to mention the dubious moral nature of many of its experiments, the CIA immediately began destroying records. To this day, nobody knows just how far the CIA took their mind control experiments or what success they might have found, but the legacy of MK Ultra is a murky one indeed, with many deaths and broken lives blamed on the CIA's secret experiments. Now, go check out the insane ways the US tried to take out Castro, or click on this other video instead.
We're ready for you now.
"20-year-old Takehiko Ino was prepared to die. It was April 28, 1945, and he was making the final preparations for his first mission as a pilot in the Japanese Army, a mission that was designed to be his last. Once he took off, there would be no turning back. He had been trained to suppress his emotions and convinced to die for the honor of his country. He and his fellow kamikaze pilots had been ordered not to return. Instead, they were embarking on a one-way mission that would only end when they had crashed their planes into the side of an American battleship in a suicidal mission that he had been told would bring honor to his family and glory to him. And yet the young student couldn't help but wonder, What if kamikaze pilot survived? By 1944, after nearly 5 years of brutal and bloody warfare across Europe, World War II had started to turn to the favor of the Allies in the European theater. After the D-Day invasion, they had repelled the Nazis from France in the west, and with the help of the Russians, the Allies were giving them hell on the Eastern Front too. It seemed like only a matter of time before the Nazis surrendered, but the war was not yet over for the Allies, particularly for the US, who had entered the war late and would go on to fight countless battles against the Japanese long after the war in Europe was over. The US had tried to stay out of the war, but Japan had forced their hand when on December 7, 1941, they launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, prompting the US to enter the war in full force. Some of the bloodiest battles of the entire war would take place in the seas and sky of the Pacific Theater in the final years of the war, as the US turned their attention to making Japan pay for Pearl Harbor. Facing the full might of the US military machine, the desperate Japanese needed a new way to fight the Americans, and so the legendary kamikaze was born. The word kamikaze means divine wind, a reference to a fabled moment in ancient Japanese history when an unexpected typhoon saved Japan from a horde of Mongol invaders in 1281. The US, though, had another name for these fanatical fighters. They called them baka bombs, from the Japanese word baka, which means idiot. Since the kamikaze planes were relatively easy to shoot down as they barreled directly toward the US ships, the US military couldn't wrap their minds around what would drive so many young Japanese men to sacrifice their lives in such a spectacular and final way. Still, the kamikaze were able to inflict some serious damage on the US and her allies. Though only about 1 in 5 kamikaze pilots managed to hit their targets, they succeeded in sinking 34 ships and damaging hundreds of others over the final years of the war. During the fierce Battle of Okinawa alone, kamikaze pilots were responsible for the deaths of 5,000 US Navy seamen, the greatest loss of life in a single battle in the history of the US Navy. The kamikaze tactics were also an effective form of psychological warfare. Every kamikaze mission was a suicide mission, and none of the thousands of kamikaze pilots who took to the air at the end of World War II were expected to return from their first and final flight. The US and her allies could not believe that so many young Japanese men were willing to take such drastic actions to defeat their enemies, and they lived in constant fear of the next desperate kamikaze attack. History remembers the kamikaze as fanatics who were honored to die for their emperor and their country, but those who survived tell a somewhat different story. In writing his 2008 book on the kamikaze, Danger's Hour, author Maxwell Taylor Kennedy had expected to find a story of fanaticism and fervent ideology among the kamikaze, but he was surprised by what his research uncovered. He found that the kamikaze were not unlike their American counterparts in their patriotism and self-sacrifice, calling them extraordinarily patriotic, but at the same time, extraordinarily idealistic. By design, kamikaze pilots were not intended to survive their first and only mission. And yet most of what we know about the kamikaze comes from those who survived and lived to tell their stories. So what happened if a kamikaze pilot survived? Some, like Hisao Horiyama, never had the chance to fulfill their glorious final mission and lived to share the real story of what drove thousands of kamikaze pilots to undertake their suicidal missions. Horiyama was 21 years old in late 1944 when he was pulled from his artillery battalion to join a new elite force of airmen. Japan was losing the war, and the kamikaze were an essential part of their last-ditch effort to turn the tide in their favor. Kamikaze missions were flying up until the very minute that the war ended on August 15, 1945. Young Horiyama was a devoted subject of his emperor, and he relished the opportunity to have his moment of glory in the name of his beloved country. Horiyama had completed his training and was preparing for his final glorious mission when the news came down that the Japanese had surrendered and the war was over. Though he was grateful that the emperor had ended the war, he was also regretful. "I felt bad that I hadn't been able to sacrifice myself for my country," he told reporters in 2015 at the age of 92. "My comrades who had died would be remembered in infinite glory, but I had missed my chance to die in the same way. I felt like I had let everyone down." How were the Japanese able to convince so many young men in their prime, like Horiyama, to willingly and even enthusiastically give their lives for their country in these suicide missions? In short, they were trained.
I've always loved sci-fi and the idea of being right on the edge of discovery and frontiers of space and doing exploration in
to die. An excerpt from the Kamikaze Training Manual illustrates just how thoroughly these young men were indoctrinated. It reads, "When you eliminate all thoughts about life and death, you will be able to totally disregard your earthly life. This will also enable you to concentrate your attention on eradicating the enemy with unwavering determination, meanwhile reinforcing your excellence in flight skills." Honor is an extremely important part of Japanese culture, and kamikaze training focused on reinforcing this ideology and convincing these young men that their sacrifice would bring glory to them in the afterlife and honor to their families who they were leaving behind. Most believed that Emperor Hirohito and the nation of Japan were one and the same, and they were conditioned to be willing to die for him. They were trained to suppress all emotions and made to believe that they had been specially chosen for this sacrifice, a great honor in Japanese culture. In some cases, Emperor Hirohito himself would visit the kamikaze training school, attending their graduation ceremonies on a symbolic white horse, and personally requesting their services as kamikaze pilots. During their training, the pilots would practice the daring moves that would be required to complete their missions, repeatedly flying their planes almost vertically toward the ground to simulate crashing into an enemy target before sharply reversing course just before crashing. These exercises prepared them for the day when they would follow through on their dive and plummet to glory and certain death. Their intense training was incredibly effective in convincing thousands of young Japanese men to sacrifice their lives for their country and die for a worthy cause. By the end of World War II, at least 2,500 pilots had given their lives in kamikaze missions. Many history books put the number closer to 4,000. At the end of their training, kamikaze pilots were given a slip of paper with 3 options on it. They could either volunteer passionately, simply agree to volunteer, or they could refuse. In theory, anyway. Many survivors claim that those who refused were simply told to try again and to pick the right answer next time. By the end of the war, the Japanese were desperate for troops. Up until that point, university students had been exempt from military service, but by 1944, many young scholars, like Takehiko Ina, found themselves drafted into Japan's new elite force of kamikaze pilots. 20-year-old Ina had been studying economics at the prestigious Waseda University when he was pulled from school and thrust into kamikaze training. Japanese culture places a high value on the firstborn sons, and thus they were exempted from the ranks of kamikaze to protect their family lines. Ina, as a younger son, certainly had his reservations about his kamikaze mission, but he welcomed the opportunity to bring honor to his family on a level uncommon for younger sons. Ina completed his training, volunteered to give his life for his country, and prepared to die, but fate had other plans for him. By the late stages of the war, the depleted Japanese were not only lacking troops, but were using out-of-date and damaged aircraft that had been stripped down and adapted for kamikaze missions. These aging planes would turn out to be Ina's salvation. On his first attempt, his plane failed to take off, and Ina's suicide mission was over before it had even begun. His second attempt made it off the ground, but engine troubles forced him to make an emergency landing before he got anywhere close to his target. During his third and final attempt, more engine troubles forced him to land in the sea, and Ina and his 2 crew members had to swim to a nearby island where they were stranded for 2.5 months. By the time they were rescued, the war was over, and Ina would never again have to prepare for certain death. Though the kamikaze trained to die, not all of them did. Those who returned fell into one of 2 groups: those who were forced to abort their missions due to mechanical troubles, weather, or failure to locate targets, and those who were unable to go through with their mission out of fear. The 2 groups were treated very differently by their superiors. Those like Ina, who were able to prove that they had returned for reasons beyond their control, were not punished. The Japanese could not afford to lose any pilots, so these kamikazes simply prepared to try again. Those who had backed out, though, were shamed and punished physically and mentally. Still, the depleted Japanese could not afford to lose even these reticent pilots, and the punishment was limited to ensure that the pilot could make another attempt. Even under these extraordinary circumstances, though, the Japanese military's tolerance had its limits. Surviving kamikaze pilots recall the fate of one pilot who returned from a total of 9 final flights, each time unable to go through with his mission. After his 9th attempt, he was finally executed for cowardice. To combat this natural tendency to pull out at the last minute, the Japanese implemented a number of strategies designed to encourage pilots to go through with their deadly mission. Pilots flew in a squadron in the hopes that peer pressure would ensure pilots followed through with their mission, and kamikaze were even given some liquid courage prior to takeoff to help them ease their doubts. Some say that the planes were loaded with only enough fuel for a one-way trip to ensure there was no hope of returning, and each pilot was made to compose a will and a letter to their families prior to their last flight. The Japanese kamikaze pilots of World War II went down in history as the fanatical and deranged samurai of the skies, committed to dying for the honor of their emperor and country, and willing to give their lives for glory. In reality, though, they were not given any real choice in the matter, with most agreeing to volunteer at the risk of dishonoring their families and being sent to die in dishonor anyways on the front lines of battle. In a desperate last-ditch bid to turn the war back in their favor, the Japanese sent thousands of young men in their prime to die on suicidal kamikaze missions. Despite this, few kamikaze did return from their missions and lived to tell their stories. Thanks to them, we know that the kamikaze were not all fanatical or deranged, but instead were desperate and afraid of dishonoring their families if a kamikaze survived. If you thought this video was fascinating, be sure to check out our other videos, like this one called The Horrors of Unit 731, to learn more about Japan's role in World War II. Or perhaps you'll like this other video instead. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time. Tragic deaths, mysterious disappearances, and unexplainable phenomenon. The realm of unsolved mysteries can prove irresistible, especially in the internet age. Now amateur sleuths can pore over the evidence on blogs, discuss their outlandish theory in message boards, and occasionally even stumble on the solutions to some of these seemingly unsolvable puzzles. But despite the aid of the internet and the interest of thousands of amateur detectives, the weirdest unsolved mysteries remain unsolved to this day. The 1987 deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives seemed at first glance to be a simple accident, but plenty of questions arose in the aftermath of the incident, and their deaths remain unsolved to this day. On August 23, 1987, a train conductor traveling through Arkansas called in to report a disturbing incident. As his train was barreling down the tracks, he noticed something laying on the tracks up ahead. He was too close and going too fast to stop the train in time, and he ran over what turned out to be two bodies. The medical examiner ruled the deaths accidental, claiming that the two men had smoked too much cannabis and fallen asleep on the train tracks, but that didn't sit right with the conductor. He clearly recalled seeing that the two bodies were tied to the tracks as the train approached. Rumors quickly spread that the two men had unwittingly stumbled upon an illicit drug drop and had been killed to protect those involved, though no one was ever charged. Years later, WWE superstar Billy Jack Haynes would claim to have been hired by a local politician to run security for that very drug drop, and he said he witnessed the murders of Henry and Ives. Despite his claim, no further investigations were undertaken, and the case remains unsolved to this day. We may never know who's responsible for the mysterious deaths of Henry and Ives, but the untimely death of Kathy Hobbs is all the more chilling and mysterious for the fact that she apparently saw it coming. As a teen, young Kathy began to experience strange premonitions that foreshadowed her own death. She was so convinced that she would die before she reached the age of 16 that she developed a severe case of agoraphobia and refused to leave the house. After years of isolation and paranoia, Kathy celebrated her sweet 16 and believed that the curse had been lifted. She began venturing outside of the house once again. Tragically, just 3 months after her 16th birthday in 1987, while walking home from the bookstore with a new paperback novel under her arm, Kathy was attacked, beaten, and left for dead with blunt force trauma to the head. In 1989, a man named Michael Lee Lockhart was charged and convicted for her murder, but he never confessed to the killing, and many question whether he's truly guilty. His conviction also doesn't explain how Kathy foresaw her own demise. Kathy's tragic death may have been foretold, but the mysterious disappearance of Elisa Lam is something no one saw coming. In 2013, guests at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles complained that the hotel's drinking water had a foul smell and taste to it. The hotel staff investigated, and what they found was truly horrifying. Inside one of the hotel's enormous rooftop water tanks, they found the body of one of the hotel's guests, 21-year-old Elisa Lam, floating lifelessly inside the tank. It seemed impossible that the diminutive girl had climbed all the way to the top of the tank, opened its heavy metal door, and willingly jumped into the dark tank, especially since the tank's door was locked from the outside. Things got even weirder when the staff reviewed the security footage from the night Elisa disappeared. She was caught on camera standing in the elevator, looking around wildly as if someone in the hallway was pursuing her. That was the last time anyone saw Elisa Lam alive, and to this day no one knows how she ended up floating in that water tank. It's always disturbing to hear about a mysterious death or disappearance, but when Mother Nature is involved, things can get truly terrifying. In January 1959, a group of Soviet students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set off on what was supposed to be a 16-day hiking expedition. All 9 of the students were highly experienced mountaineers under the leadership of a 5th-year student and expert guide, Igor Dyatlov. Little did they know that this would be their last trip into the wilderness. When the group failed to check in via telegram from their final destination, rescue efforts were dispatched nearly 2 weeks after their planned return. What the rescuers found would haunt them for years and spawn one of the most enduring mysteries of the modern age. After 6 days of searching, rescuers stumbled upon the remains of the students' abandoned camp. Their large canvas tent had partially collapsed and appeared to have been sliced open from the inside, but there was no sign of the students nearby. The next day, 2 bodies were found nearly a mile away, huddled naked around the remnants of a campfire. 3 more bodies were dug out from the snow in the following days, and the bodies of the rest of the students were found in May once the snow had melted. An early Soviet investigation ruled that the accident was the result of the spontaneous power of nature, and officials kept the details of the investigation classified for decades. Unsurprisingly, this ruling proved unsatisfactory to many, and over the years more than 75 alternate theories were put forth, covering everything from an attack by local tribes to alien abduction. One of the most chilling theories is that the entire site was staged to cover up an accident while testing a new top-secret weapon. None of these theories fully explain why a group of highly experienced mountaineers would willingly leave their tent and expose themselves to the harsh elements, why many of the bodies were found stripped naked in the brutal Russian winter, or how many of the students were found with broken bones and head injuries. Given the decades that have passed since the incident and the notorious secrecy of the Soviets, it's unlikely that we'll ever find the truth of what really happened in the Dyatlov Pass incident. The possibility of a new top-secret weapon is at the heart of another unsolved mystery too, this one much more recent and foreboding. In 2016, a CIA officer checked into the American Embassy's health office in Havana, Cuba, complaining of nausea, dizziness, and a severe headache. Within days, 2 more CIA officers reported the exact same strange symptoms, stumping embassy health officials. By the end of 2018, 26 Americans and 14 Canadians in Cuba had experienced the mysterious illness, which doctors diagnosed as concussion.
Okay, got it, boy.
Ever wondered how to help with a first aid emergency?
If your friend breaks a bone,
burns himself, if someone is choking,
Has a heart attack?
has an asthma attack, if someone has a strain or sprain,
Sorry, I just got the ambulance. Like, you don't have any expertise in these things, so. Music, 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 music. muscling down. Alright, this is hold it in. 32 pages is a lot, man. But in Direction's Castle as the that's how you start speaking, right? Angry face. halfway already. It's just effort, man.
Whoops.
Tesco, we are doing everything we can to help you shop safely. That's why, in line
What
with the
is
latest
this
government
ad?
guidance, we are now enforcing the
Why
following measures.
is this
All
ad
customers must now
here?
wear a face covering in our stores unless
I
exempt.
do not
This
want
is
to
a
hear
legal
this
requirement.
ad.
And you must also shop
Why is it
alone,
fucking 30
unless you're a
seconds
carer
long?
or
It's so
with children.
annoying. Can't we
Our
skip
traffic
it?
light system, cleaning stations, and other measures will continue to keep you safe. Thank you for your support. Tesco. Every little helps. See tesco.com for more details.
Hey, 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 ici Matson de Joux. Hey, 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 ici
Oh, that looks so weird. Oh my god.
Takes the physical to create the physical. Phase 2. The flower blossoms through what seems to be a concrete surface, i.e., greed, racism, insanity. Which flower would you be? Can
Do you almond? They don't almond. They don't almond. Do almond. Almond prime fuel your day. You almond.
Oh crap, I'm running out of pages already.
Fucking 2 ads. Oh my gosh.
As one of the most unpredictable seasons in Premier League history continues, watch the biggest games every weekend live on Sky Sports with our 2-for-1 football channel offer. This weekend, Klopp and Solskjaer clash at the top of the table as Liverpool host Manchester United in one of the greatest rivalries in world football, live on Sky Sports.
The latest episode of this long-running thriller.
Get Sky Sports Premier League and Sky Sports Football together for just £18 extra a month. Search Get Sky Sports and upgrade today. Sky TV required. Offer ends 7th of March. Further terms apply.
Do you, Almond? He doesn't, Almond. He does, Almond. Doesn't, Almond. Does, Almond. Must provide natural protein and nutrients to help fuel your day. Do you, Almond?
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life, joined by Kerry Cole. Kerry, what inspired you to become a runner?
The only run I do is the school run. My husband and kids, Liam, stop that, are walking this 5K with me. Claire, put your shoes back on to beat cancer.
And what would you say to others thinking of following in your footsteps?
I'd say, put that down. I'd say it's a great day out, even if your family drives you mad.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that wasn't. He thought I was going to finish it at this stream actually. I thought I was going to just do a bit of it, but